Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phil Bosing, and I'm the interim dean of the University of Utah College of Social Work. It's my pleasure today to invite you to our final faculty research presentation of the 2021-2022 academic year. While this event will close our faculty presentations for the academic year, is a beginning in one way as well. This event series, formerly known as Talk with Teasley, needed a name change when our illustrious former dean became our illustrious interim senior vice president for academic affairs, a certain feather in the cap of social work. Since these presentations allow us to delve into the research of faculty members that are conducting research outside of their teaching duties and provide learning opportunities for students, graduates, and others in the community, we reintroduce this series with a new title, Social Work Beyond the Classroom. Before we get started with today's presentation, on behalf of the College of Social Work, I'm proud to recognize the contributions of our American Indian community members by acknowledging that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the endearing relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. Excuse me. So thank you to those of us who are joining us live today and those who are watching the recorded version in the next coming week. Additionally, thank you to those of you who have turned into our virtual events throughout the academic year, and to those who have continued to support the Student Emergency Fund through your event registration. Today, we're excited to showcase Dr. Chad McDonald, one of the many College of Social Work faculty members working on an important topic for social workers. This presentation touches on the use of technology-based training methods to effectively prepare social workers for a career in child welfare and offers guidance for harnessing those technological approaches. It is my great pleasure to introduce our presenter, Dr. Chad McDonald, who graduated from the college's MSW and PhD programs, is now a research assistant professor, the interim director of the Social Research Institute, and principal investigator on the child welfare training and education grants here at the College of Social Work. His research focuses on workforce development and child welfare, particularly around skills development, using enhanced teaching and learning methods and competency assessment. Chad chairs the Child Welfare Concentration and is a member of the Executive Advisory Council for the National Staff Development Training Association. He has 18 plus years of experience in child welfare, including his time as trainer and administrator for the Utah Division of Child and Family Services. Before I turn this time over to Dr. McDonald, I want to thank you again for joining us today. We hope this presentation, along with the associated CEU opportunity, will serve you well. Dr. McDonald, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you. See if I can share my screen now. Okay, hello and welcome to this Beyond the Classroom episode, during which I'll review several technologically enhanced learning methods we're developing here in Utah and share with you some preliminary findings through their use and impact with participants, not only here in Utah, but across several other states as well. Some of you might have seen bits and pieces of what we'll go through, and I hope to also show you additional information that can give you a glimpse into how this is progressing and the preliminary outcomes that we're beginning to find through our pilot studies. To begin with, I'd like to share that much of what I cover today has also been published in several peer-reviewed journals, including the Clinical Social Work Journal regarding the development and implementation considerations for using virtual simulations in child welfare professional development, the Journal of Technology and Human Services, for which several of us here at SRI served as co-editors of a special issue where we recruited a group of researchers across the country to contribute and provide guidance on the various ways evidence-based theories have supported their unique design and use of the different VR platforms they are using within human services in general. More recently, we published in the International Cross-Disciplinary Peer-Reviewed Sustainability Journal regarding multi-agency collaborations around workforce development, as well as in the American Public Human Service Association's Policy and Practice magazine. So this research is informed by my intersecting identities, as Dean Osteen had acknowledged, of being a past child welfare trainer and administrator for over a decade, as well as being the current principal investigator for the Utah Title IV training and education contracts, which have funded the development of all that we'll cover today, which includes a virtual reality tool called Virtual Home Simulation, or VHS for short, and the Virtual Motivational Interviewing, or VMI app, which are both skills modules of the Virtual Social Work Trainer Suite, or VSWT. This software suite is being developed by myself and others at the College of Social Work in partnership with the Games and Applications Lab in the Entertainment Arts and Engineering Department here at the University of Utah. These skills modules, along with the real-time simulation lab dashboards that we'll see, are being developed through our partnership with the Division of Child and Family Services, or DCFS, here in Utah. So to start out, I'd like to emphasize a few points from the state of the child welfare system in general that help guide a lot of what we'll talk about. Child welfare workers make important decisions daily about children's safety. Inconsistent decision-making patterns across jurisdictions continue to confound our understanding of pathways to positive outcomes. By some assessments, including legislative audits here in Utah, inconsistent training has led to inconsistent practice, undermining effective delivery of services toward target outcomes. So we need to get better at providing consistent learning opportunities that support skill development in child welfare. Technologically enhanced modalities may provide more effective avenues toward competency than current training as usual approaches in general, as they've shown effectiveness in other fields such as aviation, military, sports, medicine, and so forth. While there's increasing attention on leveraging such platforms in social work, no real framework yet exists for the design and implementation of these platforms. And I do want to say that also a lot of what we'll talk about, even though it's centric to child welfare, is applicable to other industries, not just social work. There has been there's quite a lot of cross-disciplinary applicability in mental health, in medicine, and so forth that we've been interacting with as we develop these. In looking at the literature in some of these other fields around decision-making fallibility and variance, particularly in child welfare workers, it appears that many workers lack the opportunities to practice sufficiently to become skilled in their tasks, resulting in the tendency for workers to build their skills while on the job, which undoubtedly increases the likelihood for a negative impact on the families such workers are trying to serve. So this is Erickson's, a model of Erickson's deliberate practice theory. It's at the core of any technologically enhanced practice platform that we're working on or will be working on to address these concerns when it comes to skill development in child welfare workers. This is an illustration of the qualitative difference between the course of improvement of expert performance and of everyday activities. According to Erickson's deliberate practice theory, key components that facilitate reaching expert performance include target-specific limited aspects of a skill or performance just beyond their current skill level. These occur under guidance of a coach or teacher. They provide frequent feedback and opportunities for reflection and include repetition and frequent practice, usually daily. All of these and more are design attributes that have taken a lot of thought in the development of what we'll see. So although deliberate practice, or DP, identifies the components to incorporate into skills training, a guiding structure for developing technologically supported simulations has not been formally operationalized within the theory itself. So some researchers have suggested that multimedia training approaches that take into account cognitive load theory, or CLT, could be used in developing DP-based instructional designs. When combining DP with CLT, the flow of new material in the learning environment must be controlled so that the learner is challenged but not overwhelmed. CLT informs how multimedia instructional designs can achieve this balance by designing with human cognitive limitations in mind, such as the severe constraints of working memory, for example. A significant task of designing effective virtual simulations is to reduce the amount of extraneous cognitive load, reducing elements that may require attention, but are not part of the task the learner is trying to master. For example, technological platforms can be complex, requiring a user to manipulate multiple navigational controls, which likely reduce the learner's ability to focus on and retain information when practicing skills. It can be distracting at best. In addition to reducing extraneous cognitive load, intrinsic cognitive load, which is the load that stems from the subject matter's difficulty itself, can be reduced through a process we call chunking. This process combines elements that have a strong association with one another and relatively weaker associations of elements within other chunks. This allows basic foundational information and skills to be learned first and then combined into more complex repertoires or schemas. Multimedia instructional designs based on CLT effectively develop skills in complex performance domains. We've tried to keep these theories as the guiding principles of all design aspects for the learning tools we're developing, which we'll get into now. As mentioned, we are working on a suite of skills that combined we refer to as the Virtual Social Work Trainer, VSWT. These aim to provide deliberate practice opportunities to learners and track their progress over time. The most developed of these skills modules so far is VHS, or the Virtual Home Simulation. As I illustrate these tools, I'll also highlight some preliminary findings regarding their development and implementation, and then also illustrate how we've used real-time dashboards through Qualtrics to provide immediate bilateral feedback during our simulation labs, comparing in-person simulation impact with that of our online simulations once COVID restrictions kept us from meeting in person for these simulations. This is a screenshot of our login or account creating page, and it sets the foundation to allow us to track participant performance over time. So VHS is designed to provide practice opportunities for workers to assess for possible protective factors, protective capacities of the caregivers, or risks to any minors in the home. Documentation is also a focus of VHS. This is an example of what a learner might see when entering into one of the homes in VHS. Before moving about to assess the home environment, a participant will want to review the case file in order to make a more accurate assessment based on the specific case circumstances, including types of concerns, ages of the children, etc. This is an example of the case file they will be able to review inside VHS, which is an exact template of the current child abuse and neglect report used here in Utah. And I'm thinking there may be some questions or comments at this point, but let me just make sure. All right, never mind, I think we're good. All right. So this screenshot is of what the participant sees as they move their head around if they have a VR headset on, or they drag their mouse around in a 360-degree environment. If they want to move to various vantage points around the home, they click on the feet with a circle, as you see here in the bottom right. If they want to zoom in on items, they click when they see the eye icon, like you see right there in the center. Clicking the eye icon brings the participant into a closer view. This is the interface where the participants indicate if any items may represent risk or protection, indicate the level of importance of the item if they have met the criteria to unlock expert mode, and write a rationale for their decision. VHS is tracking all movements throughout each home and all practice sessions, including every decision they make related to their observations and why. After they're done with assessing or going through a home, this is an illustration of what the learner sees as to their performance each practice session. They're able to see how long they spent in the home, be reminded as to whether they reviewed the specific case circumstances in the case file, as well as see their accuracy scores for both risk and protection, which are combined to provide an overall score and more metrics, as you can see on the screen here. As they continue to practice in this home level, they will begin to see a line graph appear over to the right that shows their performance over time. All of these metrics combine to provide a snapshot on where they may fall along the skills trajectory from novice to fundamental to intermediate, advanced, or expert level decision-making patterns. If they click on the detailed report, as you saw in that other tab, they'll come to what you see here on the right. In aviation, decades ago, if you could successfully lift off and then land an airplane without injury or harm to yourself or the plane, you were considered a pilot. I think social work may be in a similar place today, unfortunately. However, unlike social work, today, a pilot spends thousands of hours in a flight simulator learning what is necessary to keep all occupants safe before ever putting anyone's life at risk. One key reason why traveling by plane has become the safest mode of mass transit is due to the effective feedback the aspiring pilot gets, especially as it relates to the flight simulator and more experienced co-pilots conveying back to the learner their skill performance after every session. In other words, as deliberate practice theory suggests, without being able to provide feedback to the learner after each practice session as to how well they performed the expected tasks and what they might do to improve, skill development depends too heavily on whatever the experiences are while learning on the job. This example here details for the learner all of their decisions after each practice session and where their decisions match or differ from that of a group of experts, and the reason why experts assessed the specific observation differently. Hopefully mimicking to some extent a sense of having that supervisor, coach, co-pilot, whatever you want to call it, there with them after each session. In order to provide this effective feedback, though, we had to first establish whether consensus on the best decision-making patterns was attainable, which was the focus of my dissertation. I won't go into too much detail on what the dissertation was, but this is just a summary shot. Though we are adding to the data, these results relate to the consensus among those that met the expert criteria, which we won't get into during this short time today. But each of the homes resulted in a range of 19 to 29 items that our expert group agreed on. This reduced the total possible items across all 4 homes from 409 to 99. So in other words, they only came to sufficient strength of agreement on 99 of a total of 409 items across these homes. These were identified as relevant to assessing for and planning in around risk and protective factors by at least 5 raters, and thus were the focus of the weighted analysis. Anything above 80% is considered a strong agreement. Between 61 and 80% is considered a substantial level of agreement. So as you can see, the strength of agreement regarding decisions of risk was strongest and met that threshold. And the Ramirez home came in just within 1% of the 70 of that threshold at 79.2. Interestingly, as you see, decisions related to protection all fell a level lower within the substantial agreement level. This might have a lot to do with the idea that, there may be several reasons here, but the idea that a lot of times, we get involved, or child welfare gets involved with families when things are going wrong, obviously not when things are going right within the home. And so there might be a tendency toward paying more attention to items of risk versus protection. A common cause for attrition among participants of studies involving simulations is the somatic symptoms participants experience. In a brief analysis following their use of VHS, for example, the mean scores for all 16 SSQ symptoms fell between none and slight. The 4 most prevalent symptoms across the study group were eye strain with a mean of 1.9, followed by general discomfort, fatigue, and difficulty focusing. When asked whether the participant could recommend this tool as an effective learning tool, almost 80% responded that they would recommend or highly recommend the tool as to others as being effective. These secondary measures increase confidence in the agreement results due to the apparent minimal interference by comfort levels or adverse somatic symptoms. Regarding the retrospective questions that we included asking about comfort level using VR technology, the mean pre-comfort level was about 2.5 before using the tool. The mean after was 2.9, resulting in a p-value of 0.007 at the time. In another pilot study that we are working on with LA County in California, these are the results of about 100 interns preparing to go to work in the Public Child Welfare Agency. Preliminary findings suggest a statistically significant change in skill level, particularly around decisions related to possible risk. The green bars here you see are all those that were found to have a statistical significance. Interestingly, it appears workers became more accurate in their assessment as they spent more time understanding the case circumstances. This is suggested by the significant change in how much time they spent reviewing the virtual case files embedded in each VHS home scenario. So as they looked at the case file and got more familiar with the circumstances specific to the family, they tended to be more accurate in their assessment. These are very preliminary results, however, and more data are being gathered to strengthen our ability to analyze these outcomes. Many are probably familiar or use in-person simulations. These are not like what we've been talking about with the VR platforms. These are where we had actually been meeting in person to do simulation labs here at the College of Social Work before COVID occurred. We've leveraged the same hypothetical families, new employees of Utah's DC best practice model with during simulation labs by integrating them into some of VHS scenarios that we just reviewed. Utah simulation labs are unique, though, in that more of our focus is on the observers watching the caseworkers on stage, instead of everything centered on the caseworker that's on stage going through the home. In order to help accommodate for large training cohorts, as well as provide consistent learning experiences from what occurs on stage compared to one's own perceptions of what they think they observed, we created an observation form for each participant that they fill out digitally during each segment of the simulation lab. This is an example here on the left. You see as we've kind of decked out the stage here in the auditorium at the CSW. In order to help keep all learners of large new employee cohorts actively engaged during simulation and help us and them understand in real time whether the new workers can recognize when the correct child welfare caseworker behaviors are demonstrated, this observation form populates to a data dashboard in Qualtrics after each segment. Both the experts in the room and the participants complete this observation form. And at the end of each segment, they see the immediate results of how their responses compare to what the expert says happened in the segment of that simulation. Cognitive load theory drives how we chunk each segment of learning into relatable ideas and tasks that are in small enough groups to be more easily consumed and understood. The entire cohort, including the experts in the room, can immediately see the aggregated data for all participants and know exactly what items to focus their immediate feedback on, being very specific and providing immediate behavior correction and clarification without having to call anyone out, for example, for not recognizing a behavior that was accurately demonstrated. While these dashboards are reviewed throughout each segment, the individual learner has a view on their own device of their specific answers compared to the total cohort, further providing support for immediate feedback to them individually about where they stand as to their strengths and needs in each area. This bilateral feedback loop has proven instrumental in raising the consistency and effectiveness of simulation labs compared to how they're typically conducted, which is that they focus on a worker or two going through on stage, There might be a few observers at times, and then afterward, there's typically a feedback, semi-structured interview provided, and that's about the scope of it. COVID-19 restrictions moved these simulations from being in person to being conducted via an online conference platform, making the real-time dashboard all the more useful and relevant as workers were joining from across the entire state in their own homes. And in fact, when it first occurred, I think there was 7 or 8 month period where every simulation here in Utah, the simulation labs, had visitors from out of state trying to leverage some of our same methods in order to make up for their restrictions for COVID, kept them from meeting in person as well. These live dashboards serve to help keep the learners engaged while providing an indication to each of the trainers on who may need additional support and in what specific areas. Had this not already been in place, knowing their degree of engagement and understanding would be no better than a guessing game. As you might guess, we are very interested in understanding many things that go on in these with these tools and simulation labs, including the perceived quality of this method for conducting simulations pre-COVID or in person compared to going online post-COVID. In a study we presented at SWIR this year, we gathered data from simulations that occurred between February of 2017 and December of 2021. Included almost 800 participant responses for both pre and post simulation evaluations. And among numerous other things, each simulation asked about the knowledge, skill, confidence, and feelings of being overwhelmed immediately before and after the simulation. These are the frequencies for their level of agreement to each of these questions. It might be a little better to see on this screen. A chi-square test for independence was performed to examine the relationship between simulation conducted in person versus online. As you can imagine, there's a lot of attention focusing on this shift in higher education or in education in general. Interestingly, there appears to be a significant relationship at the 0.05 level between these two variables related to perceptions of knowledge, skill, and confidence. But while we may not be able to tell exactly why yet, these results suggest perception of knowledge, skill, and confidence increased after going online compared to the perception results before restrictions were in place. More data, of course, will help flesh this out and give us a little more confidence and rigor. While it's notable that almost 94% of participants indicated they felt the online experience was effective or very effective compared to about 89% in person, this does not represent a significant difference. In general, in a general thematic analysis of the participants' comments about this simulation experience, roughly 46% did not recommend any needed changes to the simulation compared to 55% online not recommending any changes, resulting in 73% of online participants indicating no improvements needed and they want more simulation compared to about 68% in person. The last software platform I'll illustrate is another skills module of the VSWT suite, which is the Virtual Motivational Interviewing, or VMI app, that has recently launched statewide here in Utah. Like that of the other technologically enhanced learning methods I've illustrated, VMI development is guided by research regarding expert skill acquisition and expertise to provide extensive skills practice for child welfare workers. Again, with the main theories of deliberate practice, cognitive load, multimedia learning theory driving the development here. Like that of our simulation labs and VHS, VMI chunks the target skills into brief lessons that can be repeatedly practiced to improve performance over time. As deliberate practice suggests, we've embedded a coach throughout that comes in after specific decision points to indicate why or why not decision-making patterns represent the best MI response. In this example, the client is resistant to continuing to meet with a therapist. The target skill is affirmations through using partnering language. After hearing the client frustratingly indicate they don't feel any therapist is working out, the worker has the chance to choose the best MI option with this target behavior change in mind. Based on each response, the coach may come back into view, asking thought-provoking questions about the learner's choices, all while providing guidance on why the responses are or are not the best MI response to reach the target behavior change. While this is a multiple choice example, there are 7 different learning interactions integrated into VMI to help provide variety and keep the learner engaged, such as matching questions, fill in the blank, coding questions, grouping. As with other software platforms shown today, after each chapter, learners are provided feedback on their overall performance to help increase motivation toward becoming an MI expert in these specific skills they've practiced. Using a DP approach, skills training starts with practicing simple skills. Increasingly complex skills or combination of simple skills are then introduced to allow the trainee to focus on skills that are just beyond current competency levels. As shown here, the competency of change talk may start with 8 simpler skills that combine into 2 more complex skills. So these are, and this is an example of a schematic behind the scenes that algorithmically tally into how to track these users' decision-making patterns and the MI experts' feedback and their overall ratings by the end. Each simple skill is practiced to mastery using repeated exercises that require practicing the skill during interaction with the simulated client. Once all simple skills have been mastered, the learner can then practice using combinations of the simple skills to master a complex skill. For example, a learner would be presented with interactions that require identifying and magnifying, say, change talk. And the learner must perform one or more of the simple skills related to identifying and magnifying change talk to show mastery of this more complex skill. As in all things we do as social workers, there are several ethical considerations that should be made when developing and implementing technologically enhanced learning platforms, such as what has been illustrated today. And I'll only highlight a few here. And this is really important given the fact that we've got a lot of different jurisdictions across the country that have reached out to us, some upwards of 25 or 30 different states and jurisdictions. And many of them kind of get head over heels about the idea of just leveraging technology. And it's really important to understand exactly how this technology is not only developed, but how to implement it within their current workforce development efforts. Otherwise, we risk taking unethical steps in assumptions that we might make in just using these tools. Professional integrity and inclusion is the base principle of ethical simulation design and must include frequent and thoughtful user testing to validate the simulated activities' usability and acceptability. So that's one reason why we're years into this and where we're at now, spending so much time in this arena to make sure that it's hitting the mark. Users should be considered partners and involved in the design process. This is not only because users provide direct relevant design feedback, it also shifts them from being the subjects to this type of platform to being partners who co-design the simulation. The potential for programming bias is notable here, whereas developers' personal thoughts and beliefs can be coded into the simulations or scoring mechanisms. If you just have it be too heavy from the tech side or too heavy from the subject matter expert side or other stakeholders' input. For example, some may view a child's mattress on the floor during a VR home assessment as a direct safety violation, while others will see the success of providing a place to sleep for every individual in the home. Each of these perspectives is based on a complex series of personal interactions, biases, and experiences. It's crucial that these sorts of differences are realized, addressed, and ultimately used to improve the overall quality of the simulation product. As a result, for example, of our continued efforts of including pre-designed focus groups of end users and stakeholders, as well as ongoing usability and accessibility focus groups, we continue to improve the software in all aspects, from back-end structure to front-end graphic user interfacing. This is a snapshot of some changes we made to VMI after one such usability assessment with some volunteers from one of the motivational interviewing courses taught here at the CSW.
Hey, Chad, there's a question
Sure.
that says, this is very exciting. Are there considerations around diversity? Are the simulations culturally sensitive?
That's a good question. And there are, I've only shown a couple snapshots of one or two of the homes. We've got currently 4 different homes, and more homes are being added. In fact, our next recording for our next home is happening on the 31st this month, particularly with that focus in mind of being diverse and sensitive to other cultures, with some minority group representation in these homes to make sure that we can adequately approach our biases and be made aware of them, setting the stage to allow us to better assess for implicit bias. We've discussed the potential of one, as we add to the diversity and variety of these homes, of just changing a couple small variables that would call out someone's biases, to look at the difference in how they assess these homes. And so this certainly is an ongoing conversation, particularly in California, where we're preparing to record several homes as well, looking at some American Indian settings, as well as some others as well of the minority groups. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's very much on our mind, being able to make this sensitive to the disparities that are experienced in these types of settings, in being helping our workers become more culturally responsive in that regard. Transparency is the next ethical consideration that I'd like to address. And it's the open communication of interests, activities, and results associated with a program's design. Open, transparent communication presents the opportunity to review all the different regulatory approaches required by each collaborator. Subject matter experts at the CSW and DCFS and others work alongside software developers, as mentioned at the Gap Lab on Upper Campus, and even now some private companies to design high fidelity user experiences. Without frequent and careful attention to this, this collaborative structure can create a source of confusion, misunderstanding, and tension. There are also data and privacy concerns that may differ among public and private enterprises and can become an ethical issue when developing technologically enhanced learning platforms to capture and manage user performance data. Higher education institutions often require rigorous principle-based reviews of a project's data information collection features and typically involve transparency and compliance with research protocols approved by an institutional review board and so forth. And finally, I'll address the importance of accountability in the design of human service simulations. As virtual and online learning technologies reach ever greater ubiquity, affordability, and computational power, the need for large amounts of content will also increase. Fast growth and product saturation, we've already seen occur, as can be the tendency, leading to greater variations in product quality, which we've already seen occur here, with other people who've developed similar tools. To ensure both the reliability and validity from within a program's design, adherence becomes a key concept. So broadly, I refer to adherence as to the degree to which visual, physical, emotional cues can be thoughtfully placed in conjunction with one another to maximize the goals of the virtual training experience. Any program designed to register performance or learning improvements should employ a principled approach, engage relevant learning theories, and focus efforts on collecting evidence to guide design with evidence. Studies of simulation technology, including recent investigations of human services VR experiences, demonstrate a consistent positive relationship between fidelity and learning outcomes. And I can say as well, I've referenced a lot of material. I'm happy to share those references with you all, anybody who might be interested, as we go along in many of what I share, much of what I share here. But as technologically assisted instructional methods proliferate and evolve, we must act within the ethical best interests of all parties, particularly all end users and disciplines that are participating in the development and implementation of these platforms. So I've shared a lot of emerging data from these platforms. There are still yet many directions our research is going and can go. So I can only mention a few possible steps that we may take. For example, future steps to consider the validity of these results through studies focusing on experts in repeated exercises to compare the results between their additional data points. Should that prove promising, testing the results with other raters from different jurisdictions could greatly benefit our understanding of agreement on what feedback should be given to learners using these tools. Conducting psychometric analyses, exploring item or lesson level difficulties could shed light on elements or decision-making points that may need more scrutiny in terms of their difficulty levels or validity, for example. And of course, looking at the results within specific demographics, such as race, ethnicity, including implicit bias exercises, as I mentioned. These could all help to increase awareness of disparities in overrepresented populations within our child welfare systems or social work in general, who might use this tool. For studies to explore the relationship of performance outcomes indicated within the software on transfer of learning to the field would be critical. Assuming agreement levels on the best feedback for deliberately building skill during practice goes well, if there's no positive impact on transferring these skills to the field, this tool would be nothing more than tech for tech's sake, if you will, and fall short of even minimally supporting workforce development efforts. And finally, the possibilities for skill development using tools such as these might give way to providing a better understanding of the pathways connecting workers' skills to positive child and family outcomes. That'd be amazing. I sometimes refer to that as the Holy Grail, being able to track direct pathways between skills or attributes of a worker to the positive outcomes that are desired in working with families. Just some possible directions for future development could include modules where workers are interacting with the different individuals. We are preparing green screening, prototyping with that to introduce people into interviewing and other skills that are common in child welfare, including modules that focus on teaming, assessment, courtroom etiquette, and so forth. So why all this focus on developmental and learning considerations? It's because we need reliable methods for repeated skills practice if we are to strengthen our approach toward developing expertise in child welfare practice. But technology, including VR technology, isn't going to get us there unless we incorporate effective learning principles. As Ruth Clark put it, for more than 70 years, instructional scientists have attempted to prove the superiority of each new technology over old-fashioned classroom instruction. When we plan instruction solely to leverage the latest technology, we ignore the psychology of human learning. That's because the psychological active ingredients of our lessons are what cause people to learn, regardless of what media you are using. And this is fair to say it is what we strive for to be the undercurrent of all that we do, taking all of this learning beyond the classroom. So thank you for your participation and attention. I can take any other questions if you have them.
There is one in the Q&A chat.
Okay, let's see here. In the VHS, how did you determine which risk and protective factors to include in each scenario? Yes, Troy, that's a very good question. And there was a lot of pressure around how to go about deciding what constitutes a risk or protection. Like I said, there were over, just in the 4 homes in the one study I cited, that was the focus of my dissertation, there were over 400 possible items across the homes, about 100 a piece, many of which served as just distractions. We knew they were going to serve as just distractions, but how to tell exactly which items were going to be more of a considered risk or elements that might represent protective factors or protective capacities of the caregivers, I wanted to organically let a group of experts or advanced child welfare workers decide what items rose to that level. And so that, you can say, was a tertiary outcome of my dissertation. Not only was I looking at the agreement strength among that group of advanced workers, but I was also, it implicitly indicated to us what items were needed attention in immediate case planning. And so that's why it fell from 409 possible items to only 99 across all homes. We noticed again and again that those that were more advanced in their skill were more efficient at recognizing what was merely a distraction and what was more relevant for case planning. Hopefully that answered your question. Any other questions? The biggest challenges with these tech learning methods. Well, I guess it depends on who you ask, but frankly, there is a lot on the tech side that gets introduced. And I wonder if this is partly why it's not really taken as broadly a hold as in social work as some of this is taken in sports or medicine or other things, is in the developing of these in a way that can that we can be confident that the tool itself is not hindering the learning, and that the outcome we are measuring is actually a skill that we're trying to increase. And so getting a complex system of algorithms and behaviors and decision choices that can only think in terms of ones and zeros when it comes down to programming, that can be secure, that can track a person over time, that can meet the SCORM compliance levels and Windows and Mac and iOS and Mac OS, and Android, all these different platforms that they need to be optimized for. There is a lot of work that goes into this development. And so I would have to say that to some extent, this subject matter expertise is more, it's not as difficult as I anticipated it would be in terms of the collaborative effort, and the getting the tech to not get in the very way of the thing we want to impact, probably being the most challenging. All right, let's see here. The tool seems to be well fitted to the pandemic we've endured. Have you seen or anticipate an uptick in interest? Yeah, like I said, after COVID hit, Utah, I think, experienced a 7 or 8 month period of time where we didn't have a single simulation that was not attended by out of state jurisdictions. And they were happening frequently. And that's because everybody was scrambling for how to conduct this material, and states, Maryland and Montana and California and Nevada, and all these states were coming out of the woodworks without us reaching out. We haven't done, other than presentations such as this today, haven't done any sort of promotion, if you will, of this material. And already there's too much for us to balance, particularly when this contract only permits me to spend time developing these tools for the benefit of Utah's child welfare system. Thankfully, the agency has graciously agreed to allow us to collaborate with these other states in a developmental process that can bring them to the table and break down some of these siloing effect that can occur when so many people are doing such great things. So absolutely an uptick in attention since COVID has hit, and it hasn't let up very much yet. Happy to take any other questions. I don't know what time we have. Got a few more minutes if there are any other questions. All right.
Thanks, Chad. I'm a big fan of your work ever since I was over in SR. I just find it absolutely fascinating. So thanks for sharing it with us today. And I'm glad to see you've got data coming in now. So that's got to be really exciting as we start to share that. So again, thanks for being here. I know how busy you are.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Also, thank you for everyone who joined us today in our live audience, as well as hopefully those who will get to view the recording later on. Also, I want to thank all the staff who put these events on, to Carmen Tatua, to Emily Breen, Lisa Jimones, Jen Nazawa, Stephanie Dawson-Pack. You keep the ship running very smoothly, so thank you to that. Please note the College of Social Work is committed to taking the evidence that we generate through our research and in our labs and taking it out into the community. Our job is to impart this information and this data and these opportunities to you, our students, and our practitioners in our communities to continue this work. We hope that you'll continue to join us over the summer as we have ongoing opportunities to share our work and explore evidence-based solutions to various challenges. Please visit the college's event page if you'd like more information on our upcoming events. And with that, I bid you a great afternoon. Be well and stay safe.